Welcome to today's episode of the Michael Yardney podcast. I guess you're here because you're interested in property investment or financial security, financial freedom. And regular listeners would know I usually have guests on the show, but every now and then I just want to have a chat with you, just you and me. And that's what this show's about, where I'm going to share two lessons with you. The first one is 5 ways I'm going to ensure that my property investments outperform this cycle. Hopefully you're going to get some ideas for your own investments as well. And then I'm going to share one thing you need to change, I guess, to become a more successful property investor. So lots of interesting concepts that I'd love to share with you. Let's get on with the show.
Welcome to the Michael Yardney podcast, where twice each week you will learn a number of new ideas regarding success, property investment, and money in around 30 minutes. Our show is brought to you by Metropole, who specialise in helping you grow, protect, and pass on your wealth through strategic property and wealth advice. Now, here's your host, Michael Yardney, Australia's authority in wealth creation through property, who has been voted one of Australia's top 50 most influential thought leaders.
In the first couple of months of this year, we've seen lots of people focus on what's going to happen in 2024. You've seen the headlines, the top 10 areas to invest in, the top 5 lessons from 2023. What's ahead for interest rates? Where's the next hotspot? But all of these focus on short-term forecasts for property. So today I'd actually like to have a bit of a chat with you about 5 ways I'm going to ensure that my property investments outperform in this new property cycle that we're a year into now. And that's really going to focus more on the long term. So yes, the property market turned at the beginning of 2023. Some segments of the market outperformed others. Of course, rents skyrocketed, and some states' markets performed more than others. But really, rather than focusing on the short term, in my mind, I really want to look at how my own properties are going to outperform, and those of the clients at Metropole, how we recommend they invest as well. And hopefully you're going to get some ideas from that as well. Because look at all those short-term forecasts for property. Look what happened to the forecast, mate, only a year ago. Then the about faces, the economists realised that, hey, the market turned and it was okay. What about all the forecasts made in 2020 when COVID hit? Now, I can understand that they were unusual, difficult times. There was talk about unemployment reaching high levels. What about all those cliffs that they talked about since then? The unemployment cliff, the interest rate cliff, the fixed interest rate cliff, all those things that didn't eventuate. So nothing came of those. It's not just property forecasts. Just look at the financial section of the newspapers or websites, and you're going to read about the resurgence in the price of Bitcoin, or the Australian property market's doing this, or the US market's doing that. Only a few months ago, gold was out of favour. Now it is. And who can't forget this? Well, I'm old enough to remember the surge of the value of technology stocks in the early 20s, and then there was technology stocks in the height of the lockdown as well. So all these type of headlines, they're short-term focused, and they encourage investors, or let's call them speculators, to try and time the market or look for the next big trend. But in my mind, successful investing, like many things in life, it's counterintuitive. It's countercultural. And one of the core tenets of my approach to investing, or, well, I guess successful investing, is to be goal-focused and planning-driven. And the good news is that focusing on the long term, the big picture trends, removes the burden of trying to correctly guess future short-term trends, such as what's going to happen to interest rates, when are they eventually going to fall, how long is it going to take for inflation to come under control, where are going to be the next hotspots, and the many variables that the average analysts and many investors spend their days obsessing over. Now, in a culture that tends to be market-focused and performance-driven, my approach has seen our clients at Metropole and my own personal investing acting on a financial plan, a customised strategic plan that we build for our clients, rather than reacting to the vagaries of the investment markets. You see, being long-term focused means we invest in the type of property that's always worked, rather than what's working now or what's going to be hot this coming year. So at Metropole, our approach is to build on a number of frameworks that have stood the test of time and are proven and trusted. And here are the principles that I follow personally and we like to help our clients with. Number one, have faith in the future. While it's easier and more trendy to be pessimistic, I believe that optimism is the only realism. There are so many doomsayers out there, and I know that because I regularly get trolled by them, particularly on YouTube. There's never been so much information out there about how to become financially fluent on the internet and YouTube and podcasts. Never as much information as today. However, there's just as much misinformation, and this has made many people pessimistic. Oh, by the way, I don't know a rich pessimist. Yet, based on history, I confidently believe in the ability of our capitalist society to prosper on the back of our collective ingenuity. I mean, socialism and communism really hasn't worked. Have a look at those other parts of the world there. And if the last few years didn't teach us anything, they should have taught you that residential real estate is an asset class in Australia that's just too big to fail. We know there's over $11 trillion worth of residential real estate, and most of it's owned by owner-occupiers. So it's not an investment class, really. Well, it is for you and me as investors, but that's what underpins it. And the fact that only about 20% loan-to-value ratio on the whole Australian property market, remember 50% of homeowners don't even have a mortgage against their home, that makes it too big to fail. I mean, neither the government, the Reserve Bank, or the private banks are going to allow it to fail. More than that, residential real estate is an asset class that you can use to build your wealth because it's underpinned by that large proportion of owner-occupiers, homeowners who'd rather eat dog food than give up their homes. And as I said, 50% of these homeowners don't have a mortgage against their home. They paid it off a long time ago. And a large percentage of other homeowners, well, they've paid off a significant portion of their mortgage. So the 5 ways I'm going to make sure that my property investments outperform the market. Start off with principle number 1, have faith in the future. The second principle is to have patience. Contrary to the financially illiterate, strategic investors refuse to react inappropriately to disappointing events. That's why they've got a plan to follow. That's why they act on their plan rather than on the short-term ups and downs of the investment markets. They realise that, as Warren Buffett wisely said, wealth is the transfer of money from the impatient to the patient. The third principle that underpins my strategy to outperform the averages is to have discipline. Similar to the principle of patience, discipline sees strategic investors continuing to do the right thing, even if the fruits of their decision can't be seen in the short term, because they believe the power of their strategy. They don't get sidetracked by the next hotspot. They don't get sidetracked by the next sudden bargain that seems to come across their desk. The fourth principle is build a great team around you. Property investment's a process. It's not an event. In fact, property investment is a long-term process, and it takes up to 30 years or so to develop financial independence through residential real estate. And all successful investors that I know, they continue to educate themselves, so they become financially literate. But the world's changing, the market's changing, so they've got to keep learning and improving. But they're careful whose advice they take, because they've learned that most educators and most, well, let's call them so-called advisors, have got a vested interest. Only a couple of days ago, I was speaking to somebody who joined let's call it a club. She had to pay a fee to get advice. And then this organisation recommended she buys a property in some regional part of Western Australia. I said, who paid them? Did you pay them for advice? Oh, no. I said, so who are they working for? And she said, me. And I said, no, they're not. Follow the money trail. They were paid by the developer, the builder, the developer, to sell you their property. So whose side are they on? Interestingly, I found out that she bought the land and took on an investment loan, a building loan, to help the builder pay for the construction. So she funded the builder's development margin. Unbelievable. So I got sidetracked, but it disappointed me to see this really nice young lady was, taken advantage of because she didn't understand. So be careful who you take advice from. Successful investors surround themselves with professionals and mentors, and they're prepared to pay for advice to ensure they maximise their investment returns. But while successful investors pay their mentors, as I said, the average investor gets their advice for free over the internet or in blogs or on YouTube. They haven't learned the simple fact that the cheapest advice is the one that gives you the best investment results. And obviously, you're not going to get that for free. On the other hand, financially literate investors accept guidance from their holistic wealth advisors, and if they've got sufficient discipline and allow time and compounding and leverage to work its magic, their investment success is, well, I was going to say all but guaranteed. Look, while property investment is simple, it's not easy. And here's the fifth way I'm going to ensure my property investments, my investing is successful. And that's that I don't make forecasts. I have expectations. Now, you've probably heard me say this before, but I think it's worth repeating. As you can imagine, I'm frequently asked in the media, by journalists, what's ahead for property? Now, I'm asked that both by clients, by media outlets, and I think for many of them, I'm disappointing them with my answers because I tend to say something like, a lot's going to happen over the next decade. But I don't make forecasts. Instead, I have expectations. Now, there's a big difference between forecasts and expectations. I expect interest rates will eventually come down, but I'm not really sure when. I expect we're going to have another recession, probably in the next decade, but I don't know when that's going to happen. I expect the property market is going to keep rising over the next couple of years. And then prices are going to slump, but I don't really know when. I expect some of the investments I'm going to make will do well and others won't do as well, but I'm not sure which ones they are. Despite all these information I know, I expect the world's going to have another financial crisis at some time. I don't know when. Now, these aren't contradictions. They're not a form of cop-out. As I said, there's a big difference between expectations and forecasts. And expectations and anticipation of how things are going to play out in the future, based on my perspective about how things have happened in the past. I've been around enough cycles to be able to see patterns in the chaos that other people are currently seeing. But if I put a forecast on these things, it's putting a time frame to the expectations. Now, of course, in an ideal world, it would be great to be able to forecast, to know what's ahead for property, to have a better level of accuracy. But we just can't do that because there are too many moving parts. Again, as I started off in our chat today, remember all those forecasts that were wrong? Sure, there are all those statistics that are easy to quantify, but what's hard to identify is exactly how and when millions of strangers are going to act in response to the prevailing economic and political environments. And every year there's going to be an X factor that crops up, something unforeseen, an event out of the blue which could lead to local or overseas issues that will undo the forecasts many of us have made. So what should you do about that? I found the most practical approach is to have expectations of what could happen, as I said, without specific forecasts. That's because when you expect something to happen at some stage in the future, you're not surprised when it happens. Expecting the worst while preparing for the best forces you to invest with room for error. And psychologically, it prepares you for the inevitable disappointments. That's exactly how I planned for the property downturn in 2018, 2019. And that's why I was prepared for the challenges the market gave us in 2022. I didn't know when these property downturns would come, how long they'd last, or how they'd affect the value of my property portfolio, or to be blunt, the cash flow of my business. But I knew a downturn would come once again, and I was prepared for it with cash flow buffers to see me through difficult times. So what I'm trying to explain is there's a huge difference between I expect the next property downturn to be sometime in the next decade and I expect the next property downturn to be in the second half of 2027. You see, one of the big differences is how I invest. If I expect the property upturn we're currently experiencing will be followed by another downturn, I won't be surprised when it comes. But since I didn't know when it would happen, I wouldn't focus on my investing on trying to time the property cycle. That's trying to time the cycle or looking for the next hotspot are two of the reasons many property investors fail. On the other hand, strategic investors maximize their profits during property booms and minimize their downsides during the downturns by investing in the sort of assets that have always worked rather than looking for the next hotspot or the next type of property strategy that works now. They own investment-grade assets in investment-grade inner and middle-ring suburbs of Australia's three big capital cities, the type of property that keeps growing over the long term without fluctuating wildly in prices when the market slows down eventually. Now, I said the top three capital cities, and I know Perth is doing really, really well this year. I know it did well last year. I know Perth actually underperformed, hardly performed for a decade. So people are saying to me, well, Michael, why don't you invest in Perth now? Because the Perth market's doing really well. I actually looked at the economics of Perth, and interestingly, 45% of the state's economic performance, 45% of its output comes from the mining industry. It really, really is a big mining town. It's a lovely place to invest, but I'm looking for cities which have got much more stability. Now, the Melbourne market's currently underperforming, but that doesn't change my investment focus, knowing that it's the area where more migrants are coming than anywhere else, more knowledge workers, more high income earners, where there's a significant undersupply of property. But there isn't one Melbourne property market or Sydney or Brisbane property market. You've heard me say that before. And the great thing about property investing is that you can outperform the averages by choosing the right location, choosing the right property, and even in downtimes, adding value manufacturing capital growth through renovations or development. So I'm confident in the long term because our nation is going to keep growing. The government, despite the challenges of immigration, has a business plan to grow our population to 40 million people by the middle of this century. But there's going to be more knowledge-based workers, so they're higher incomes, and also more jobs being created. And that trifecta is going to mean that more people are going to want to and need to buy property, own property or rent property, and that's going to underpin our housing markets. Now, a minute ago I talked about an X factor, and maybe I should just quickly explain that because that's an unexpected risk you didn't see coming. Strategic investors try and protect themselves by owning the best assets they can, but also by having financial buffers in place to ride the ups and downs of the cycle, because as you've heard me say, property investment's a game of finance with some houses in the middle. But interestingly, they also set up the right ownership structures. They insure themselves, because if you think about it, your income stream's probably one of your biggest assets, and they get holistic advice. But the biggest risk is what no one sees coming, because no one sees it coming. No one's prepared for it, and no one's prepared for it. The damage will amplify when it arises. So an X factor, that unexpected event, it seems to come every year. Small ones every now and then, and probably once every decade, every decade or so, one gets a big X factor coming out of the blue. The world seems to break. So what I've done is share with you my I was going to say my frameworks. It is my framework, but boy, we've got a number of frameworks we help our clients with. By the way, we didn't talk about location, did we? We didn't talk about what style of property or where. That's also very important. But I just wanted to give you an idea of the big picture frameworks we start with. So I see this year as a year of two halves. In 2024, the first part of the year is very likely going to be affected by still a lack of consumer confidence, people being a little bit uncomfortable, uncertain about what's ahead. But I also see that as a window of opportunity because, as I said, in the medium term, our market's going to be underpinned by three factors: significant population growth, strong jobs creation, and the increasing wealth of the nation. And so this is a great opportunity for investors with a long-term focus because we are still just over a year into this new property cycle that began in the first couple of months of 2023. So getting in at this stage of the property cycle doesn't happen very often. Now, I'm not suggesting you try and time the market. That's just too difficult. And in truth, you missed the bottom that occurred last year. But the market, if it hands you an opportunity like it is at the moment, and you right for it, you've got a secure job, why not take advantage of it? Now, taking advantage of the new property cycles created significant wealth for investors in the past. So moving forward, demand's still going to outstrip supply for some time to come. As we've experienced record levels of immigration, I know it's lowering a bit, and we're just not building anywhere enough properties. You've heard me say that one podcast after the other. At the same time, the cost of construction of delivering new dwellings is going to keep increasing, not only because of supply chain issues, but we've got the lack of skilled labour. A lot of builders and developers, they're not going to commence new projects if they're not financially viable, and currently new projects are only going to come online at scale when considerably higher prices are achieved than the current market price accepts. I mean, if you think about building those apartment buildings the government wants us to build, we've got to get land in the most expensive parts of our city, the inner and middle ring suburbs, and then you're going to use the most expensive construction technique, building apartments, which is a lot more expensive than building houses, to try and fill the need. So it's not going to bring affordable accommodation. But I believe later this year, in due course, consumer sentiment is going to rebound when it's going to become clear that inflation is continuing falling and that interest rates have peaked and the expectation of interest rate drops is going to get stronger. And at that time, pent-up demand is going to be released as FOMO, greed, overtakes fear, the fear of buying early, as it always does as the property cycle moves on. Oh, by the way, we're going to keep experiencing a prolonged period of strong rental growth. The rental crisis is only going to worsen further. There's no end in sight for that. By the way, I don't like it. Sure, as a property investor, I love seeing my rents increase year after year, but I don't think it's good for society, for Australia, to have such a shortage. But we've discussed that in previous podcasts. I'm not going to give you an answer to that now. Of course, I'm not suggesting you take advantage of tenants. What I'm suggesting is you recognise there's currently a problem, a lack of rental accommodation, and you, as a rental accommodation provider, provide a solution. So rather than trying to hunt down a bargain, my recommendation to you is focus on buying an investment-grade property in an A-grade location, because these type of properties are in short supply, but they're still selling for reasonably good prices. And then hold them for the long term as their value increases. Now, I know for some of you it may feel counterintuitive to buy at a time when there are so many mixed messages in the media. But still, I believe at the moment you can benefit from less competition, lower consumer sentiment, minimal downside risk, minimal risk of oversupply. Boy, when was the last time you saw that group of factors leading you to moving into to being able to take advantage of the property market? Now, again, property investing is a process, not an event. So it all starts by putting a plan together. And I'm sure you've heard my team at Metropole specialise in helping our clients outperform the averages by giving strategic wealth and property advice. So why not go to metropole.com.au and find out about our range of services, but have a chat with my team and let us build you a strategic plan. We're using some really, really good software at the moment that allows our clients to actually fiddle and manipulate and do a whole lot of what ifs as well. So we start with the plan and then we help implement the plan. By the way, I should say, the plan's not necessarily buying a property. It may not be right for you at the moment. You may have to sell, but a plan will give you a crystal clear idea of what you should do, what you shouldn't do, if you're on the right track. And then our buyer's agents, we're much, much more than buyer's agents. We're big enough to tip the scales in your favour, but still small enough to care about you and help you safely grow into generational wealth. I guess it gives you an unfair advantage. I'd love to be part of your wealth creation journey. Metropole.com.au. For the second part of today's show, we're going to talk about something different. I'm going to talk to you about one thing you need to change to become an even more successful property investor. Now, I've been spending a bit of time over the last little while planning for Wealth Retreat, where I'm going to be spending 5 days with a group of already very, very successful business people, entrepreneurs, investors. But this thought came to me as I was preparing some of the agenda. So please be patient, because it may not be exactly what you think. And rather than disagree with me, humour me for a moment and let's have a chat. You see, I've found that for most property investors to change their level of wealth, they must change. Now, sometimes we love change, sometimes we hate it. In fact, some of us love to change, but a lot of people fear it. So why is change difficult for many of us? Because I guess it's change makes us move out of our comfort zone. It takes courage to leave something you're familiar with and try something new. Of course, one of the jobs of your subconscious mind is survival, to protect us. It likes to keep things the same, preferring safety and security over the untested and the unproven. You know, we've all heard people say, better the devil I know than the devil I don't know. We tend to believe that if we stick with what we know, with what's familiar, then we won't get hurt. The problem is, in terms of wealth creation, it's not what we know that's holding most of us back. It's what we think we know that isn't so that's holding us back. Now, I know you're used to listening to my thoughts on property, but for a moment, I'd like to share my thoughts on wealth creation, which is really why we're into property anyway, aren't we? In fact, I'd like to discuss why many Australians are not as far advanced with their wealth creation as they'd like to be. They're not as successful as they'd like to be. They haven't developed the financial freedom they deserve. Yet they continue to do the same thing over and over, hoping somehow things are going to be different. Think about it. If you keep doing the things you've always done, you're going to keep getting the results you've always got. If what you've been looking for was where you've been looking for it, chances are you'd have already found it, wouldn't you? Doing more of the same, even harder and longer, isn't usually the answer. But being willing to change will usually create better results. However, you can have more because you can become more. So we're going to talk in a moment about what holds us back. But if you put things into perspective, we know that less than 1% of property investors, just under 20,000 in Australia, of the 27 million Australians own 6 or more properties. Now, I'm not saying you need 6 properties for financial independence, but it really seems to show that the vast majority of investors never get what they want. So, again, let's have a talk about what I think is more important than finding the next hotspot or knowing where to invest in property. And what that is your what I call your wealth operating system, your financial blueprint, the programming we received as a child. Look, it was initially described, the first time I learned about this was Wallace Wattles in his great book, The Science of Getting Rich. And more recently, a couple of decades ago, Harv T. Eckers wrote a great book, Secrets of the Millionaire Mind, which is really a must-read for all property investors. And they both said your thoughts lead to your feelings lead to your actions, and your actions determine your results. So it's no coincidence that your inner world creates your outer world. And the programming you received, now usually as a child, leads to your thoughts, your fears, your limitations about wealth creation today. So one of the first steps in change is changing your thoughts. So how do you think about money, about success, and about prosperity? What do you say to yourself? What's that little voice inside your head saying? For many of us, our thoughts revolve around fear, scarcity, and limitation. The problem is what you focus on is what expands. If you think about fear, if you think about scarcity, limitation, what do you achieve? Remember what I said a while ago. Your thoughts lead to your feelings lead to your actions, and your actions determine your results. So money is a result. Wealth is a result. Your health is a result. Your results in all these fields are caused by you, by your actions. These occur in the outer world, but are determined by your thoughts and your feelings, your inner world. For many Australians, their current mindset just won't let them get to the next level. It's not what you don't know that prevents you from succeeding. It's what many people think they know that isn't correct that's their greatest obstacle. The way they think is their greatest barrier. And that's because of their programming, what I call their wealth operating system, the way they were programmed, the way you were programmed by the things you heard, things you saw, things you experienced. This is a type of thermostat that's usually set in childhood and gives each of us our feelings and beliefs about money and wealth well into adulthood. The problem is, for most Australians, their thermostat isn't set for wealth. Many of us need to intentionally change our inner world, our way of thinking. We need to start thinking about prosperity, abundance, and success to enable us to have those things. Well, more than that, to attract those things. So firstly, we need to change the way we think about ourselves. We need to see ourselves as wealthy people, as wealth attractors, as wealth creators. This means you may need to change some of your ingrained thinking pattern or overcome some negative ways of thinking that have developed as a result of past experiences. Okay, so why are we scared of change? Why do we feel it's hard to change our way of thinking when change is natural? In fact, the only constant, the only thing that you can absolutely count on is change itself, can't you? Often we don't like it because our subconscious mind is programmed to keep things the same, as I said, to protect us. You know, as I said, the devil you know. Yet most successful people share one critical characteristic, the trait of adaptability. They embrace change. They look for opportunities to expand and learn. Another common characteristic of the successful people that I see is they've got a mentor. They belong to a mastermind group. They hang around like-minded successful people. Because, of course, that makes you think in a particular way, doesn't it? So if you continue doing the things you've always done, you're going to continue getting the results you've always achieved. So if you want to move forward in your wealth creation, you're going to have to do things differently. I think it was Einstein who said the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, but expecting a different result. Now, here, I'm not talking about where you buy or how you buy a property or what sort of property you buy or if it's positive cash flow, negative cash flow. We're not even at that level yet. We're at the level of how you feel about money and wealth. Why are so many people selling up properties at the moment when they know over the long term it's going to go well? Why are so many people given opportunities but they only see risks and problems? Why are so many people interested in coming to Wealth Retreat but scared of the change they may have to make to get the wealth that they want? Results change when people change their way of thinking. Now, if any of what I've said has made an impression on you, you'll realise that if you're going to go to another place in your life financially, then you're also going to have to do some things differently. I still am. I still have mentors in my business, in my personal life, in other areas. I'm still wanting to change and grow. But doing things differently, first of all, requires thinking differently. If you change your thinking, you're going to change your actions. If you change your actions, you get different results. And the investors I've seen stuck in the same financial position didn't understand the importance of what I've been sharing with you today. So thank you for sticking with me, because this isn't exactly what you probably expected to hear on this podcast. Or maybe some of you who are regulars know that I believe the psychology of the way you think is more important than anything in your success in all areas of your life. You see, as I've explained, you can have more because you can become more. You see, here's the other side of the coin. Unless you change how you are, you're always going to have what you got. All this property stuff I share with you every week is powerful, but on its own it won't do it. In order to have more, you need to become more. And the rich keep getting richer because they're programmed to, they're conditioned to, while most Australians are boxed in by the boundaries of their thoughts. So wealth is a result. It's a result of your thoughts and your beliefs, which lead to your actions. It's important for us to understand that we're all fully responsible for our financial results. I mean, I think it was Steve Jobs who said, you can't help it if you're born poor, but it is your fault if you die poor. So if things aren't working out the way you want them to, you need to stop taking the easy way out and blaming outside factors. It's not your boss's fault, and it's not the government's fault, and it's not the interest rate fault, it's not the bank's fault, it's not even the lack of information. There's so much information out there. You need to stop justifying why you're not as financially successful as you want to be. Most of what you have today, you've attracted by becoming the person you are today. If you want to change in your life financially, you must change first. Now, obviously, thousands of people listen to this podcast every week, or tens of thousands actually. So I don't know your personal circumstances. So please don't be offended by what I say. But every year when I get together with a room full of already very, very successful people at Wealth Retreat, they get this, they know this, and they still want to change because they want to get to the next level. So I'm not belittling what you've already achieved, but I'm actually pointing out to you, if you want to get to the next level, you have to change. If you want things to change in your life financially, you've got to first change. Everything you're doing right now, you're in the habit of doing. And everything you're not doing right now, you're in the habit of not doing. If you've heard me speak on the topic of psychology of success, you'll know I suggest you always get what your subconscious wants, not what you think you want. But interestingly, there is a way of upgrading your financial thermostat. Hey, why not join me for 5 days at Wealth Retreat 2024? Think about it. Actors flock to Byron Bay. Investment bankers go to Sydney and Melbourne. High-tech entrepreneurs migrate to Silicon Valley. You know, the list goes on and on. When you want to play any game at a high level, it's important to be where the right people are and build great relationships. It's not complicated, yet many people simply fail to do it. It's as though they think Australia Post is going to pull up and drop a package of world-class valuable relationships on their doorstep. Worse, in today's hyper-connected world, it may seem like virtual connections can build real relationships. But check out the actual definition of virtual: existing or resulting in essence or effect, though not in actual fact, form or name. So if success is predicated on relationships, do you want real relationships or virtual ones? Real success or virtual success? Obviously, real's much better than virtual, isn't it? So where can investors, business owners, or entrepreneurs go to get into a room full of the right people? Well, the good news is you don't have to uproot yourself and go to a new city. You don't even have to travel too far. Of course, that begs the question, where can you find a room full of thought leaders, property investment experts and serious and successful investors. Well, we're holding Wealth Retreat on the Gold Coast on April 27th to May 1st. We've been running Wealth Retreat, I think, for 19 years now, and the experience has become legendary in real estate investing subculture. This year, once again, we're holding it on the Gold Coast, and I've actually got Mark Burris there as our keynote speaker, Andrew Wilson, Ken Ray, Simon Kirstenmacher, Mark Creedon, Tom Corley, Brett Warren, who else? Pete Wargent, Stuart Weems, and a lot of other successful investors there. Because it's not just the faculty, it's the people you have breakfast, lunch and dinner with. We've got a gaggle of unknown heroes of investing, people who are highly accomplished investors, business people, entrepreneurs, investing entrepreneurs. People you'd probably never discover, much less meet outside Wealth Retreat. Now, it's going to come around real soon, so go to wealthretreat.com.au and register your interest, and we'll be in contact, because you can't actually book in. I speak to everybody who comes to Wealth Retreat to make sure it's right for you. We're at an interesting stage of the property cycle. You heard me say that in the first part of this show. 2024 will be the year when some investors are going to create lifetime wealth. So if you're serious about building a true property investment business and you realise that business and investing are based on relationships, well, that's worth investing in. Again, you're going to have a great faculty, but you're going to get so much from being around the right people, and don't count yourself out. It's fun, educational, refreshing, extremely valuable. It's way beyond just making money at Wealth Retreat. Of course, just one great idea, one opportunity, one relationship could easily give you a great return on your time and money. So if you're ready to step up to the next level, and as I said, don't count yourself out by thinking you're not ready yet. Don't count yourself out by saying, I'll go next year. If you're ready for 5 days of mentoring, networking, masterminding and fun, and you want to come out with a firm new plan for the next 5 years of your life and a toolbox full of tools to help you achieve them, then go to wealthretreat.com.au, register your interest and we'll be in contact. And I'll talk to you and make sure Wealth Retreat's right for you, because if it is, I'll back you with my money-back guarantee. I look forward to spending 5 days on the Gold Coast with you at the end of April. Well, thanks for spending the last little while with me, and I hope you got some benefit from this show. If you did, and you know somebody else who'd also benefit, please tell them about the Michael Yardney podcast. There's a share button on every podcast app. On Apple Podcasts, there's 3 little buttons down the bottom. Press it and share it, or just tell them about the Michael Yardney podcast. I hope you're going to be doing them a favour, and you'll definitely be doing me a favour and helping me in my quest to make as many people as possible financially literate. Now, there's ways of catching up with me between these shows. Just look for Michael Yardney on social media, or why not join my private Facebook group? Go to Facebook and look for the Property Update Facebook group. And I have a way of saying thank you to you for subscribing to this podcast. Go to podcastbonus.com.au. There'll be a link in the show notes, podcastbonus.com.au, where you can get a bunch of ebooks and reports. My way of saying thank you. And when you've got time, why not listen to some of the old podcasts? There's individual lessons in each of those that I think would be helpful for you. I'll be back again real soon. In the meantime, have a great week. Make it a great week.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Michael Yardney podcast, which was brought to you by Metropole, who help their clients grow, protect, and pass on their wealth through strategic property and wealth advice. If you like what you heard and don't already subscribe, you'll find us on iTunes or on your favourite Android app as the Michael Yardney Podcast. Watch out for our next show, which comes to you twice a week, and you'll learn some new ideas about property investment, success and money in around 30 minutes. To get more of Michael's thoughts, go across to www.propertyupdate.com.au and sign up for his daily morning briefing, and you'll hear from not only Michael but a group of leading property success and money experts. And just a reminder that the information you heard in this show today is general educational advice and not specific investment advice, as we don't know your personal circumstances. If you're looking for specific advice, why not ask the team at Metropole to help you?